Hi everyone, welcome to THT, and today we are going to discuss what are the best decks to get a Vader and Luke showcase. So, as usual, this video is sponsored by Card Market, the biggest marketplace to buy and sell cards in Europe. So, moving on to what this video is all about. This video is all about getting those sweet showcases. To get those showcases, there's two things you need to do in the upcoming sectors, regional qualifiers, and galactic championships. You need to perform a top 64 at least with Vader as your leader or Luke as your leader. And then the best performing player without leader will get the showcase. So let's say if you are the best, if you play Luke Skywalker, specifically Luke Skywalker Faithful Friend as your leader, and you are the highest performing Luke Skywalker Faithful Friend deck in the tournament, and you're also part of the top 64, you will receive as a prize the showcase version of that leader. And the same applies for Vader, and the same applies for every leaders in the game. So this is kind of a cool little incentives to be running different kinds of leaders, because obviously if you're running a very meta leaders like Django or Han or anything else, the competition, of course, to be the best performing player without leader is going to be a lot tougher. However, the reason why we're going to be focusing specifically on Luke Skywalker's and Vader is because those two showcases are by far going to be the most valuable. And the reason is because there's simply no other way to get those showcases in the entire game. In order to be able to get a Vader and a Luke, the only way to get them, as we know, is to be the highest performing deck in a regional qualifier, sector qualifiers, galactic championships. It's also going to be available as the prize wall. You can redeem points for the prize wall in the galactic championship, but once again, I don't expect a lot of people to be able to get that. So, needless to say, before the Galactic Championship, there's only going to be, at most, 6 copies of each of those cards, since there's only 6 sectors and regional qualifiers before the Galactic Championship. And then Galactic Championship, maybe we can expect a dozen of those being handed out. So, regardless, they are going to be extremely rare and extremely valuable, because they are very iconic characters. They are the very first... leaders that we ever had the chance to play with in Star Wars Limited. They are the most anticipated showcases that I think in the entire game that we've ever seen. We are going to expect all the collectors who try to collect all the showcases from set 1 to be completing their collection with those two leaders. So yeah, they're going to be extremely valuable for collectors. For players, not so much. I don't think those leaders are very strong at the moment. They're not really exactly the meta leaders that they used to be, but they're still kind of playable and competitive, and that's why we're going to be focusing on this video. What is the best way to run, to do the highest performance possible with those leaders in order to get yourself the best chances to get those as a showcase, and which would be a very valuable price. Currently, a showcase goes between... So the cheapest one goes for about 30 euros. The most expensive one go to 250 euros, something along those lines. But showcase like this, it's very hard to put a price on it because it's going to be so rare. But I can expect those to be at the very least in the neighborhood of 400 euros. And I wouldn't be surprised if a leader like this could reach the 4-digit price. I wouldn't be surprised. So this is something worth noting. Those leaders are going to be incredibly rare, and there's a good argument to be made that winning the showcase or one of those two showcases might be even more valuable than getting anything that you can get from being in the top 8 of the tournament. And for that basis alone, I think there's going to be a kind of a sub-meta of a lot of people running Luke Skywalkers and Vaders in those tournaments, because those prize is just... to some degree is basically even more valuable than having the highest, being in the top 8 or even winning the event. So that's going to be very interesting to follow. So First of all, I just want to say that if you want to perform in the tournament, I don't think Luke and Vaders are a good choice. I think Luke and Vaders are leaders that are underpowered compared to other options you have available. And I don't necessarily think that from a purely competitive standpoint, I don't think you should be running those leaders. But once again, you don't need to win the event in order to get your showcase. You only need to be the highest performing player with that leader, and you need to be part of the top 64. I'm expecting those events to have maybe in the neighborhood of 500 players, so 400 to 500 players I think would be a reasonable expectations. So making top 64 is not going to be easy either. So let's take a look at what I believe are the best decks you could be running for those specific archetypes, starting with Luke Skywalker. So Luke Skywalker, in my opinion, the best color with Luke Skywalker is green. And the reason why I think that's the case is because it gives you access to Alliance Dispatcher, which is the card on the top here. So Alliance Dispatcher is amazing. It's a 1 resources unit that is a 1/2, and it has the ability that you can exhaust, and you get to play a card from your hand, and that card costs 1 less resource. So basically, as long as it's in play, it's sort of a ramp card, but only for unit. Doesn't work for your leader, doesn't work for event, but it works for any units in the game. And this is the only way in the game to ramp right from turn 1, which is very, very powerful. So you can basically play your Alliance Dispatcher on turn 1, and then every single unit comes with a discount after that, which is very, very strong. It's very strong because we do play quite a few expensive units. We got the Redemptions, the Home 1, Luke Skywalker, 10T4, Obi-Wan Kenobi. It is extremely valuable to be able to play those cards 1 turn earlier. But not only that, even getting a discount on cheaper units can be very useful, as it will free up some resources for you to put a shield on those units. So let's say if you want to run, a Concordan, you can actually play Concordan Interceptors on turn 2, and then you have enough resources to give it a shield. And there's a big difference between a Concordan Interceptor and a Concordan Interceptor that has a shield on it. So this is a very, very strong synergy with Luke. So why is this card specifically good on Luke? Simply because the main disadvantage of Dispatcher is that he's extremely vulnerable. He's a ground unit with very bad stats, very easy to get rid of for your opponent. So in my opinion, Luke is the best because you can run Alliance Dispatcher on turn 1 and then give it a shield, which makes it infinitely more difficult to get rid of. There's very few cards in the game that can kill an Alliance Dispatcher on turn 2 whenever the Alliance Dispatcher is shielded. So for that reason, I think Luke Green is the best approach. The other advantage of Luke Green is obviously Luke Green has basically this green, blue, white is the color combination that has the best Sentinels in the game. And Sentinels synergize very, very well with shields, and Luke Skywalker has the advantage of being able to give out shield. So I think that this approach of Sentinels plus shield is going to be a very successful approach to beat aggressive decks in general, but more specifically to beat Jango. Jango Fett is obviously the boogeyman of the meta. Is going to be the deck that you're going to be wanting to beat. If you want to reach the top 64, you're going to be wanting to beat Jangos on multiple occasions. You're going to have to beat Jango. And I think that Luke Skywalker gives you that opportunity because it gives you access to all those Sentinel units. Sentinel units are great against Jango because Jango struggles with units that have very high health pool. Jango basically doesn't try to kill units, it just tries to exhaust you and then try to race you. But he cannot do this if the unit has Sentinels. So a unit that has a very high health pool and is also Sentinels is something that is very difficult to deal with for Jango. Most likely they're going to have to use Tarkin Town, but they only have 1 use of Tarkin Town in the entire game. So then after that, it can become very problematic for Jango to deal with those very high health Sentinel units. So in Sentinel units, we got access to the best Sentinels in the game. We got Village Protectors on the ground. We got Concordan Interceptor in space. Then we got the Bright Hope. Bright Hope is one of the best cards against Jango. The 2 health, the 2 attack allows you to kill all the 3 2s that will try to get through. Your opponent is most likely going to use Tarkin Town to be able to get rid of it. And if you can drop a Bright Hope with a shield, then it becomes very difficult for the opponent to get through. Shields also are very valuable on very large units like Luke Skywalkers, or even Um, because, or even like cards like Home One, because then you can actually attack with your unit without them being exhausted. So shield is one of the ways you can actually make sure that your units are harder to exhaust. Django is going to be looking to ping those very high value target to prevent you from attacking. And if you get an attack of those units, you get to have a huge amount of restore that will allow you to heal yourself back up and get back into the game. So there's a lot of different ways you can build this deck, but I've decided to go for a version that is optimized to be two specific decks. One is going to be Han Yellow and the other one is going to be Django. So this is kind of like how I build the deck. So in order to beat Django, we have obviously all the Sentinels in the universe. We got the Concordant Scepter, the Village Protector, the Bright Hope, the Tantive Fall on the most expensive one that you can get out of U-Wing Reinforcements, and then we got the Redemptions to heal ourselves back up in the later stage of the game, or drop a massive Sentinel. I also think that Village Protector is one of the best cards against Han Yellow. Like cheap Sentinel units that have shields are very annoying to deal with for Han Yellow, because since they're cheap, Han 1 Yellow does not, the bounce that Han Yellow has doesn't really do that much. Like if your opponent's Waylay is your Village Protector, you're actually pretty fine with this. Waylay is only powerful when it gets to bounce very expensive units like Obi-Wan Kenobi's Attentive 4, that kind of thing. So cheap Sentinel units like Concordant, especially Village Protector, Concordant Interceptors, are very good against Han Yellow. And we have more of those guys in the sideboard with Echo-based Defenders as additional like cheap Sentinels that we can drop. We can give them a shield with Luke, and that can be very annoying for Han Yellow. And as you can see, we're also running the Scanning Officers, which is one of the best anti-Han Yellow cards in the entire game. Be able to get rid of those smuggle cards and exhaust the enemy units. That is just something that is very good to do. So obviously in turn 1, also I really love Clone Deserter versus Django, because Django, if you play Clone Deserter on turn 1, you give him a shield, it becomes basically a 2-3 shielded with Restore 1. That kind of card is very difficult for a Django deck to kill, and if he doesn't kill it, then he never redeems the bounty, and then it just becomes a 2-3 shielded for 2 that has Restore 1. That is going to be really, really good at healing you every single turn and put some pressure on the opponent as well. We got the classic Battlefield Marine, still the best 2 drops in the game, so obviously we want to run that. In the 3 drops, we are running a couple of new cards here with the Blue Leaders, which is both a 3 drop and a 5 drops. I really like the flexibility of this card. It's not particularly good against Django, but it's pretty good against Han, as a 5 attack is a key breakpoint in order to get rid of most of the ground units that the opponent plays and be able to kill a ground unit and then survive, say, on the 5-3 is going to be very valuable. It's also just a really strong card against a lot of players who are going to be running like 2-3s in space, like whether the Sabine players, even the new Luke players, they like to run those space units, or the Poe players. So this is Blue Leaders is a card that is just a very, very strong card in general that I think you're going to be wanting to play. It's a great that you're going to be wanting to play as it's just a very flexible card. And then we also, of course, play Resupply, gets us faster into all our leaders, so fastest into the U-Wing Reinforcement and the expensive card of this deck. Then we got 2 Feather Dragons. So one of the biggest weakness of Luke, in my opinion, is going to be trying to beat Piet. I think Piet is going to be our weakest matchup by far. Generally speaking, Control decks and Piet is going to be 2 of the most difficult matchups for Luke. So basically, you are hoping that you're not going to be playing against too many of those. I think if you want to reach the top 64, in my opinion, if you want to reach the top 64, your best strategy is probably not to, and especially since you're playing a leader that, in my opinion, is underpowered compared to the field, your best strategy is to try to stack your deck against the most popular decks. In this case, we decided to stack it against Django and Han, but basically, and then kind of give up on the matchup that are impossible to beat, especially if those matchups, we don't expect a lot of people playing those decks. So in order to make top 64, you don't need to win every single one of your games. So this is something worth noticing, and this is the reason why, and I think you're better off trying to kind of like improve your deck against the popular deck than rather than trying to fight losing battles. With that being said, we still have a few weapons against Piet. We got the Fail the Dragon, we got the Rival's Fall. Those are extremely powerful removal to get rid of those large units, but generally speaking, Piet is going to be a very difficult matchup for you because he can just play bigger and faster than you can. But as I said, it's still, of course, Fail the Dragon is still going to be a valuable card. So basically, my kind of meta call on this specific deck is to think, okay, there's not going to be too many control decks. There's not going to be too many Piet decks. I'm okay losing to those decks and trying to get your wins on the aggro decks, on more of the other like kind of low mid-range decks, that kind of thing. So it's kind of the meta call I'm going for here with the specific archetypes. So we got 3 takedowns is one of the best removal you could play against a Han. You need to be able to kill those DJs, kill those techs, preventing them from stealing your resources. So the 3 takedowns are here for that. The Obi-Wan Kenobi, like the big sentinels on the ground, very good combination with Luke Skywalker. Rival's Fall. So the reason why we're running Rival's Fall is because I expect you to be playing against a lot of random people running pilot leaders, and Rival's Fall is one of the best cards against pilot leaders. He gets rid of the unit, regardless of if it is a leader or unit, or because obviously when pilot leaders deploy on a space, they create those giant space units that are leaders, so they're very difficult to get rid of, and Rival's Fall is one of the answers for that. Rival's Fall is also a surprisingly good card against Jango, because Jango as a leader is so much more powerful now when he's deployed than when he's not, compared to the previous meta where there's really not a lot of options for Jango to exhaust multiple units at once. Now that it is very easy for Jango to tap down multiple units at once, a Jango that is deployed is a really big threat. So having a way to one-shot that Jango with Rival's Fall is very, very nice. Even though this comes one turn after Jango deploys, at least you know you have a way to get rid of Jango, and then you can deploy your Luke, and then you know your Luke has no way to get exhausted. So this is what I want to emphasize on, is the fact that this comes on the same turn as your leader deploy is huge, because there's nothing worse than a Luke that gets exhausted, because Luke obviously only gives shield whenever he attacks. So being able to say, oh, I'm gonna kill your Jango is now dead, his ability is off, I can deploy my Luke, and then I can attack Luke, get my shield, and obviously we know shield are very important against Jango, and this is going to be like a huge power play in this matchup. So then we obviously play Luke Skywalker, which is the best blue-white card in the entire game. We can get it from U-Wing Reinforcement as well, which is great. We're running Tantive 4, which is our best blocker in space, and then we can also get it out of U-Wing Reinforcement. Even if it gets dealt with, it leaves an X-Wing behind, which is neat. U-Wing Reinforcements obviously kind of an auto include in any mid-range green-white deck. It's such a powerful play, allows you to play multiple cards at once. It's one of the only card in the game that can stabilize both the space and the ground at the same time, because you could basically pull like a Bright Hope and a Village Protector. You can block the space, block the ground, or you can even pull a Village Protector's Concordant Interceptor, then use Luke's ability to give a shield to something. No, you can't do that. But yeah, anyway, you can run Village Protector, Concordant Interceptor, and you can even pull like a Clone Deserters. This is also one of the advantages of running those 1-drops, is like now you can pull like a 6-drop, and then you can pull a 1-drop alongside going for the 6-drop. So it's a deck that is very well optimized for U-Wing Reinforcement. It also gives you more chances to find your scanning officers, which will help you get rid of those pesky smuggle cards. And then obviously at the end, we got those top enders. Redemption is a great card against Han. It's also a good card against Jango most of the time. Obi-Wan is just a very solid late game card that we're going to need to overpower our opponents once we manage to stay alive. Last but not least, we also got 2 copies of Luke Skywalker, of Luke's lightsaber, which is basically a way to say to our opponents, if you want to kill the Luke, you better do it in one shot, because otherwise we're just going to drop a lightsaber on it, heal him up, getting a shield, and win the game. But keep in mind that Luke does not only have to be played on Luke, you can play this on any unit you want, sometimes this is what you need in order to kill important targets. So for example, you get a village protector, your opponent is going DJ, your opponent is going tech, you're afraid that he's going to DJ tech, you don't have a scanning officer and you don't have a takedown, you can bring the lightsabers on the village protector and then you can kill the tech, and that's a very valuable play that you can make. So this is a deck that I think is gonna beat most aggro decks, and I think it has a good chance against Han Yellows, and I think it's a deck that will do pretty well against most of the other off-meta random decks, and you hope you're not gonna be running against too many controls on too many mid-range, too many Piet. That's basically your main thing. Ramp and controls are both of your weaknesses, basically. Talking about the sideboard now. So we got Echo-based Defender, which is just more Sentinels for the aggro matchups. It's very good against Anne. If you can get Echo-based Defender and give it a shield, that's very nice. Obviously, that's if your opponent doesn't have a 3/5, but cannot attack with 3/5 before that happens. Then we got a couple, we got Evidence of Crime, which is kind of like good against Gar Saxon, good against deck who like to play a lot of upgrades. Then we run one more copies of Felder Dragons to try to improve those Piet matchup a little bit. And we got the Chewbacca's, which are basically going to be getting in for every matchup basically that is not, that doesn't run red. Chewbacca is going to be a pretty good card. It's really good against Han Yellow because you can just prevent units from being bounced, which I think is very strong. Unfortunately, only works on vehicles, but we do play quite a few vehicles. But then you can also play as a 5/6 sometimes. It's okay. And then we are running the techs for the more grindy matchup. So this is kind of my take on the deck. I'm not pretending this to be perfect. Obviously, you should probably play yourself and try to refine the list. We have Milano this weekend, so hopefully you can playtest enough before Milano, but obviously this could also be a deck that you might want to pick up for the upcoming tournaments in Denver or Liverpool. As I said, I think it's the best approach to get for Luke Green. I think a lot of people already figured out that Luke Green is the best way to play Luke, and I would definitely agree with that. But obviously, there's a lot of different ways to build a deck, especially with the new expansion that gives us a lot of powerful green-white cards. So this is kind of my take on it. Most expensive card of the deck is Luke Skywalker, coming at 22 euros. It's a classic. It's an expensive card still, but not as expensive as it used to be, and it's still an absolutely auto-include in almost every single white-blue decks. So very worth picking up, in my opinion. This is my Vader list. So basically, there's been historically two main ways to run Vader. Is a Vader Green, and is the Vader Blue. In my opinion, the best of those two decks. So Vader Green is not a bad deck. It's just an inferior version of Bosk Green. I think if you are even Pied Red, if you are going to be running a Ram deck, you are much better off running either Bosk Green or which will do better against aggro, or Piet Red, which are going to do, and Piet Red is going to do much better against pretty much everything that is not aggro. So for me, there's not really any reason to be running Vader Red. You could make the exact same argument with Vader Blue by saying that it's just a worse version of Bosk Blue. But the big difference between Vader Blue and Vader Green, and the reason why I chose Vader Blue over Vader Green, is because I think Vader Blue is far better position in the meta. As we know, the main threat that we're going to be worrying about is Django. Django Red is going to be the main threat. And Piet Red is probably going to be the second most played deck. So on the previous deck list we talked about, we decided to give up on the Piet matchup, which I don't think is a very solvable puzzle for Luke Skywalker anyway. For Vader Blue, obviously the bad matchup is going to be Han Yellow. So in this case, we decide to give up on the Han Yellow matchup, and instead we're going to be focusing on winning those mid-range matchups. If you're running Vader Green, you're going to get crushed by all three decks. We're going to be crushed by Piet, we're going to be crushed by Django, and we're going to be crushed by Piet. Well, at least with Vader Blue, we're getting crushed by we're probably getting crushed by Han Yellow, but against Django and Piet Blue, Piet Green, Piet Red, or Piet Blue, we stand a chance, and I'll explain you why. So basically, this is basically hard control deck. So one of the things that is noticeable about the new version of Django is like the new version of Django is very, very good at basically racing. It's very good at dealing with your units. And the reason why that's the case is because now it has the possibility to exhaust multiple units at once using War Juggernauts or IG-2000. Basically, hard control kind of plays around that by saying, well, it's okay because I'm not really running any units anyway, so I don't really care if you can multi-tap multiple units at once. Most likely I'm going to have one unit in play. So the fact that you're able to multi-tap doesn't really make that big of a difference. So this is kind of like the way. Also, hard control got some really new valuable tools in those matchups, notably the famous card No Glory Only Result. No Glory Only Result, which is one of the best answers you could possibly have against Ruthless Raider. So if you've seen my list before, if you've seen my Bosk Green list before, this is pretty much like this kind of deck. We're running a lot of removal in order to control the early stage of the games. The Paradox side, the open fire, or most likely on turn 1 is going to be we're not playing anything, and on turn 2 we just get rid of whatever removal. If you know how to run hard control, this is going to be very familiar territory for you. We're running, so the reason why we're running the Onyx Squadron Brute and the CR90 Fleet Runner is as a main counter to indirect damage. So one of the things that can be very problematic for hard control is indirect damage, because obviously when there's no unit in play, indirect damage becomes direct damage to your face, which is very powerful. So having an Onyx Squadron Brute and a CR90s in play is a way for you to soak up those damage, and once they die, they actually will heal you up, which is very valuable. Then we are running so we're running, of course, a ton of removal. I'm not going to get into too much details about the deck list because this is pretty much like known territory. We're running 3 Supreme Leader Snow because I still think this card is amazing against Django, which is, as you know, our main target. Annihilator and is a new way to get ourselves like even taller in the late game. There's an argument here for going Crate Dragon instead of Annihilator. And you might consider Crate Dragon to be a better card in certain matchups, but I really like Annihilator as a way notably to deal with Piet. So this deck is, I think, quite well positioned against Piet because we have a lot of, yes, he goes faster than us, but to be fair, our removal can very efficiently get rid of all those larger units, and when we get to the super late game, Annihilator is going to be one of the best tools to basically lock the game out. Some people might be surprised to see Palpatine over Devastator. In my opinion, for a hard control deck, Palpatine is still a better card than Devastator because yes, Devastator can deal damage to face, but being able to deal 6 damage entering battlefield effect instead of 4 is a very big deal for control. So I personally still prefer, in the context of a hard control deck, I still prefer Palpatine over Devastator. Then yeah, as the rest of the deck is pretty much what you would expect. Some people might be surprised to see no Disintegration in this deck, which is a new card that basically you spend 3 and you deal, you put an opponent units down to 1 health. And the idea is you play no Disintegration, and because it's a black card, you also get to combine it with Vader's ability so you can kill something of any size. I don't like this combo, and I'll explain you why. First of all, what is the advantage of this thing? The advantage of this is to be able to kill something of any size for 4 resources. But it's not really the thing that our deck is struggling with. As you can see, we're playing Paradox side, Merciless Contest, No Glory Only Results, Rivals Fall. So we already have plenty of ways to kill very large units. The other thing as well is like, yes, it kills a large unit, something of any size, but it doesn't deal with leaders. And more importantly, it deals with something in 2 steps. While we want removal that are able to kill stuff in one go to prevent those things from attacking us, while with no Disintegration you have to do it in 2 steps, which is very, very inconvenient. The last thing I don't like about node integration is like it's obviously a red card, and the more red card we put in our deck, the worse we make Lieutenant Charleston. And Lieutenant Charleston, in my opinion, still remains one of the best anti-aggro card, even though of course the meta is going to be more space focused. A 6/6 for 4 Sentinels remains a very powerful things, a very powerful asset for us to defend ourselves against most decks. So my opinion is that I think Node Integration is a big trap for Vader players, and I don't think you should be running that card in my opinion. So obviously one of the advantage, so Vader is basically worse than Bosk because it doesn't have ways to double heal with a bounty. It doesn't have all those sweet bounty synergies that I think are very powerful. What it does have, however, is a very powerful deployment. Something interesting about Vader is obviously we're going to be wanting to deploy him most likely after the Super Laser Blast, but the dynamic of being able to run Super Laser Blast, wipe the entire board, and then deploy Vader is extremely valuable. So most of the time, we're going to be wanting to deploy Vader after the Super Laser Blast. And the fact that the leader's ability is also helpful in the control dynamic to get rid of small units is very valuable. So I like Vader's. Vader's has always been a good control leader. Actually, the very first out control decks were running Vader Blue. It got surpassed by Bosk, but I still think it's the best way to run Vader. And this is going to be the version of Vader that's going to give you the best chance of reaching the top 64, in my humble opinion. Let's talk about the sideboard a little bit. So we got False Chokes, which is mostly a card against Han Yellow, because you want to be able to have more ways to interact with the DJ Tech combo. Then you are running I Am Your Father. So I Am Your Father is a card that I've playtested a lot for Bosk Blue as an additional sideboard card against Han Yellow, and this card has performed surprisingly well because it's basically we basically love both sides of this card. We love to deal the 7 damage to anything if you for 3 resources because it's another way we can injure DJ Tech. It's another way we can one-shot Han. But if your opponent shows, let us draw the 3 cards, we are very happy about this. Actually, we prefer drawing 3 cards than dealing the 7 damage because card advantage is extremely important in the Han Yellow. So we really love both sides of this card in this matchup. So it's really a great way. Also, the fact that we're not running Deathmark means that the deck cannot really draw cards as well as the previous version. So this is why I like I Am Your Father a lot as an additional ways to kind of draw cards. Then we run Sham Syndulla, which is very good against Ramp deck, but also an excellent card against Han Yellow. So even though Han Yellow is a weak matchup, post-board, we got 9 very nice sideboard cards to improve this matchup after sideboard that you might want to consider adding in. And then we got the a third Annihilators for the Piet matchup. That's kind of how I build this. We are basically pre-sided to fight against aggro, and our sideboard is mostly to fight Han Yellow, Ramp decks in general, and obviously Piet as well. So Sham Syndulla is going to be both good against Ramp and against Piet and against Han. And Annihilator is going to be good for the Control Mirror as well. So this is kind of how I build this deck. As you can see, I'm not minding too much the Control Mirror. The only thing I have to fight the Control Mirror is the Restock. I don't expect a lot of control deck, so obviously Restock is the Restock in main is just fine. And that's basically how I build this deck. If you like playing hard control decks and you want to be chasing this Vader showcase, I think this is a good starting point. Once again, I'm not pretending that this is the ultimate version of the deck, but this is, in my opinion, going to be a very good starting point for you to start exploring this archetype and see how we can improve it and adapt it to the meta. I think probably the sideboard is where there's the most room for improvement, but I think it's a very interesting deck. For your information, you can pick up Annihilators on card market for less than €4. A very good deal since I think Annihilator is going to be a widely playable legendary. Anyway, thank you so much for following that video. Let me know what are the decks you've been looking at. Are you going to be chasing the Vader / Luke showcase? If not, maybe you're going to be chasing other showcases because obviously you can get any showcase you want as long as you are top 64 and the highest performing leader with this specific leader. So are you chasing any of those leaders, and have you got other cool ideas for other ways to run Vader or Luke that will be successful in a competitive environment? Thank you so much for following that video. If you like that video, please like and subscribe. It really helps the channel a lot. And I'll see you next time for another video.